I'm Gemma Allen, here at our studio in the New York Stock Exchange with theCUBE, connecting Wall Street to Web3 and Silicon Valley. Joining me now, we have a man who's no stranger to any of those paradigms, Tiago Sada, Chief Product Officer at Tools for Humanity, better known to many of us as the team behind Worldcoin. Welcome, Tiago.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Tiago, fascinating journey, fascinating company, but I think most importantly, what a crazy time we're in, right? Like, we're living in a world that none of us imagined 5 or 6 years ago, 2019, when Tools for Humanity was first founded. The whole space of identity, it's something that used to be quite personal, quite emotional, but now it's becoming cultural, and I think perhaps even arguably a national and certainly personal security risk. Tell me about the journey you guys have been on and what it is that you've been building, and I guess, what's changed and accelerated in that time.
For sure. So, world is basically a network of real humans. And what that means is we think that in the age of AI, um, as cool as AI is and all of the new things that we'll get to do, it also comes with new challenges, right? And some of those challenges are like, how do we know what's a human and what is not on the internet, whether it's social networks or everything that it is? And so world is designed to build that. Now, we started this journey not recently, but many, many years ago, almost 6 years ago, when Sam Altman from Y Combinator back then, and then OpenAI, got together with Alex Blania, and they back then thought, you know what, we think this AI thing is going to happen much sooner than people expect. And so the world is going to need new kinds of infrastructure to be able to adapt to those changes.
Wow. And your own relationship with Tools for Humanity and with Sam and the team, you've had an interesting career, right? You've been in TradFi, as we say, in cross, I think you've had some interesting jurisdictional responsibility too. Tell us a little bit about your journey to this and what brought you into the space, especially working with Sam and this team.
For sure. So I actually started doing robotics engineering. I came to the United States from Mexico to study that, but I dropped out halfway through to start a FinTech in Latin America. So we scaled that. We actually got to go through Y Combinator, and that's originally why I met Sam in 2017. And after selling that company and then scaling that throughout all of Latin America, places like Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, I was about to start another company, and I bumped into Alex and Sam, and they told me about the project, and it was just so crazy. It was really cool how they were going to solve this problem that wasn't immediately present back then, but it was very clear how it could happen if AI actually fleshed out the way we thought it would. But then also it touched on a lot of these things with crypto that I had been facing with fintech, right? I've been building fintech products for many, many years. And it was just very clear that we needed a new system, that we needed to update the system because the current way of building a lot of financial products was broken. And now I think we've seen that play out, right? We've seen things like stable coins take off and decentralized finance. And so it's very cool to see all these things come to fruition.
So talk to us a little bit about the product itself. It's essentially blockchain and biometrics based, I guess, on the principles of Nathan's Law, right? This idea that we need to democratize access for everybody, everywhere. Talk about, what does this entail? I've certainly seen pictures and videos of orbs. They're fascinating to look at. Fill us in on how this is executed.
So simple is the system is very simple. It's basically a network, just like Facebook or Twitter are networks, but this is a network where only real humans can join. And and the really cool thing is that once you have that primitive, and because it is built not just as a product, but as infrastructure, as an open protocol that anyone can integrate, now any website can know whether you're a real human or not. Now, that network has other features built into it. So again, just like Facebook, you can share photos or you can have events. Money or digital money is a native feature of that network. And the reason for that is that we think that in a world with AI, we not only need proof of human, but we also need a global financial layer for the internet. So we're building this at the same time. And so you as a user, if you want to join World, you simply download an app and you can already start using it even without visiting an org. Now, to unlock most of the functionality, you have to verify yourself as human. And so we built this device called the Orb it looks very futuristic and cool, but it's basically a high security camera
Mm.
that is able to tell whether you're a real human or not without keeping any of your data. And so you go and visit it just like you would go to the DMV to get a driver's license. You can go to an orb near you at a mall or a coffee shop. The process takes like 30 seconds and it issues you something called a World ID. which is this proof of human that you can now use on the internet, whether it's on our app or other third-party apps like Tinder, for example, to prove that you're a real and unique human.
Wow. And I want to get into the activation side of this and the marketing and the audience side because I think it's truly fascinating. But first, tell me a little about the decision to, I guess, create the orb. Did you try and test other technology and ways for, I guess, identification and, you know, helping people understand like how you can truly differentiate using, I don't know, passports or like how did you end up with this solution?
It's a great question because I think no one wakes up one day and says, I want to build a new kind of hardware device and then go and spread it all over the world. Like that's a really hard thing to do. So as you can imagine, we tried every other thing that we could think of before that. We started with like the basics, right? Can we do this with email or phone verification or a CAPTCHA? I think like most of us understand nowadays that those things just don't work anymore. It's really easy to cheat them with AI. Then we went to where I think a lot of people's head went originally, which is document or official ID verification. But that has a couple of challenges. First, more than half of the world's population doesn't have an ID that can be digitally verified. And that's just not in developing countries. That includes in many places like Europe or in the United States, a significant portion of the population you cannot verify their ID or they just don't have one. Um, but it's also not private, right? To verify an ID, you have to see everything about a person. You have to see their name, their picture, their date of birth, oftentimes their address. And companies are terrified right now of storing that information. I think rightfully so. Customers don't want companies storing this information, and companies don't want to store it. And we were no different. But then lastly, and more importantly, the problem with identity verification is you can actually just cheat that with AI. And so as we were talking about, I ran a fintech already back then. For most of these KYC providers, you could just go on Google Images and print a picture of an ID and show it on a little cardboard thing, and you would go through the flow. Nowadays, with generative AI and deepfakes, it's very easy for me to create and print a sophisticated fake ID and then wear a deepfake to show that either I'm a person that I'm not or I'm just a completely fictional person. And so it just doesn't work at all.
Hmm.
After that, we considered other things like mathematical models where people endorse each other. But at the end of the day, we reached the same conclusion that governments and big companies like Apple have for a long time, which is the fundamental answer is biometrics. Fundamentally, you have to verify that someone is there. And so we had to spend 3 years to figure out how to do this in a way that was secure, in a way that was privacy preserving, and in a way that could scale to the whole world, not just a few people in a few cities.
Wow. And speaking of the whole world, I mean, you've had some very interesting adoption in interesting jurisdictions, right, the world over. Fill us in on what that picture and what that engagement has been like in countries that I guess many of us might not have expected to have had the success that you've had.
Absolutely. So the growth has been crazy. I think this year, especially, we've taken really big steps. And it's important, right? Because at the end of the day, world is only as useful, like any other network, as the number of people that are on it. So we're about to cross 40 million people on the network, and we're getting close to 20 million of those verified with the org. And this is all over the world in Latin America, in North America, in Europe, in Asia. And so to give you a few examples, in Lisbon, Kuala Lumpur, and Buenos Aires, in all those cities, somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 people in the city have verified.
Mm.
And so it's just crazy to be walking around the cities and you look at random people on the street and you know that at least 1 out of 4 of those has probably visited an orb and have a verified World ID. And they not just have verified, but they're now starting to use the ecosystem, right? The applications developers are building, the integrations companies like Tinder are building. And so we're seeing a lot of momentum behind the project.
Wow, Tinder, that's so interesting. I never thought about the dating aspect, but it certainly has its use cases for sure. So tell me about the activations on the ground. You go out to these cities and countries the world over. You set up, I think from what I read, all over, right? Shopping centres, streets, different places where you can basically reach mass audiences. People sign up and then they come and have their picture, I guess, verified to the orb device. How do you, like, even thinking about how you execute on that to sound so phenomenally complicated, how have you mainstreamed this?
So the truth here is that if we tried to figure all of that out in every single country around the world, we probably couldn't. Because every country works sort of differently. And in some places you want to be at the mall, in some places you want to be at the coffee shops, some places you want to be at the streets. And so the way the network is set up is just like the protocol itself is decentralized. The operations are decentralized, similar to you would see with something like Uber or Airbnb. And so we as Tools for Humanity make the orbs and we contribute to the protocol, but then we either lend out or rent out these orbs to local entrepreneurs who earn a small fee for every verification they do, just like Bitcoin miners would earn a small verification, a small fee for transactions they verify. And these entrepreneurs get very creative and they find what is the best way on any given country and any given market to explain people the project. And so in some countries you go and they have these huge verification sites, sort of like DMV where people come over. But the most common model we've seen so far is the mall one, where people rent out a space on a mall. They'll have a lot of education about what the project is. And obviously the orb is kind of eye-catching, no pun intended. And so when people are walking by the mall, they see it and they want to hear about the project, and then some amount of them end up verifying and joining the network.
I mean, it sure attracts attention and has those kind of sci-fi cinematic vibes, right? In
It
terms
feels
of,
like out of a Pixar movie, for sure.
I know I can imagine being in a mall with my kids if they saw that. In terms of, the use cases for this technology globally, or this idea of, I guess, identity and protecting your identity becoming a public utility, which I think is probably not too far away, right? Certainly when you think about the risks ahead. We've seen interesting cases in India and countries around the world where, governments at least are trying to really understand how they can use technology like this to democratize access. At the same time, a lot of people have been marginalized from these traditional systems for a long time because of that very reason, right? Because mass utility has never reached them. How do you think this differs?
So I think the utility is immense. And we very strongly believe that the internet needs a new layer of infrastructure that is proof of human, that we believe that as amazing as AI is, um, and we're not just believing, we're seeing a lot of things break, right? So I think everyone can understand this in the context of social media, for example, right? Where bots on Twitter have been an issue for a long, long time. But it goes beyond that, right? We're just talking about dating apps where it's actually a very serious risk, and it's one of the main focus that these apps have right now is how do you ensure that trust in the platform and safety of your users when people are getting catfished with deepfakes, right, and with fake profiles. It goes into financial services, where any fintech that you talk to will tell you that right now they're getting defrauded left and right with fraudulent accounts and stolen identities because of deepfakes and AI credentials that are getting created, and it's a cat and mouse game. Right? You see this for retail companies like or Shopify stores will put out promotions and they all get taken over by bots, right? Credit card fraud.
Mm.
The list goes on and on and on, right? Even something as basic as Taylor Swift tickets, right? Concert tickets. You put out your tickets and they all go to scalpers, and now the fans they either don't get to go to your concert or they have to pay 5, 10 times the price to be able to go to it. And so I think the world is starting to realize that this is a really important problem, but the world is also starting to understand, including governments, that it's also a really hard problem to solve. And to solve it, you have to go to the root of the issue, and ideally, you have to do this in a way in which you don't have to trust anyone, right? In which everything is transparent, everything is open source, everything is decentralized, and your data is only under your control, not under no one else's control. And so, yes, it's taken us a while to build World. It started more than 6 years ago, and it was a lot of years of research and development. But we think this is truly the solution, and we're seeing it actually grow as such.
My God, when you mentioned ticket touts, are you preaching to the converted here? Because that is the real pet peeve of mine. Please solve for that. I always say you shouldn't have to be a millionaire to take your kids to Taylor Swift, right? But talk to me a little bit about the technology and layer to this. I think a lot of us just visualize, a data center full of pictures of us, right, or pictures of humans, which I don't think is actually the case at all, because this is all based on anonymity, right? Can you help break it down for those of us who are perhaps less technical than yourself?
Absolutely. So one of the most counterintuitive things about World is that it's not just privacy preserving, it is likely one of the most private systems you've ever used in your life, period, much more than any app that you use on your phone. So there's a couple of layers to this that I'll speak to high level, but we have a lot of blogs and explainers and videos about that if anyone's curious about this. The first line of defense is that everything that happens on the org gets processed locally, right? And so to be able to make this possible, the orb actually inside of it has a really advanced NVIDIA chip, just like the ones that we use for training and running inference on AI systems. And so what that allows the orb is it allows it to process and to think whether you're actually a real human or not without having to send that data to a server. So that is the first line of things. The orb is able to process your data on locally. Now, once the orb is done with that, it actually encrypts that and it sends it directly to your personal phone and it deletes it from the device. And so what that means is that now only you have control of your data. And after that, there's two new types of cryptography that we had to advance. One is called zero knowledge proofs, and the other one is called anonymized multi-party computation that you can imagine as just as end-to-end encryption solved privacy for messaging, right? You're able to message your friends on iMessage without Apple being able to see that. Well, in the same way, zero knowledge proofs and anonymized multi-party computation allows us to build a system and a protocol where you're able to verify your humanity and your identity without us or apps like Tinder or anyone else in the world knowing who you are or what you're doing other than yourself.
Wow. You mentioned NVIDIA there. Talk to me a little about your partnership strategy. It must be pretty interesting at what is a very interesting time. Do you guys see a partnership with OpenAI in the future? How are you guys kind of planning for that?
I think generally we imagine that in the future, every single app and website that you use on the internet will have to use proof of human one way or another, whether you're doing that explicitly or your browser is doing it behind the scenes. I think it's very clear that most of the things that we need on the internet, they require trust, and that trust will be underpinned by proof of humanity. And so, in terms of partnership, right, we've been throughout this year, we started announcing some gaming partnerships, right? And so, Mythical Games and Razer, one of the largest gaming companies in the world, are integrating World ID in the context of preventing bots and preventing cheaters with AI, right? Then we moved to dating, where we announced a partnership with Match Group, the largest dating group in the world, with brands not only like Tinder, but Hinge and many others. And and now we're starting to see expansion not just to other industries, but even to governments, right? So we've announced an MOU with the government of Taiwan for a pilot where they're using it for polls so that their polls are not manipulated. And we think we'll see many more like these going forward. But in the future, what you can imagine is any company that you can ask me about, the answer is probably yes, because I think that every single app and website on the internet will eventually rely on proof of human.
Well, it certainly feels like we're heading that way. So, Tiago, tell us, last question, what's ahead for you and the team at Tools for Humanity? What are you working on right now? What's, I guess, exciting you guys the most?
Yeah, so the biggest part of our focus is still just giving access to world to as many people around the world as wanted. So we're making orbs as fast as we can. We're deploying in as many countries as fast as we can. We have a couple of country launches coming up before the end of the year. So that is our main priority, is just meeting the demand that we have, which is huge all over the world. In addition to that, we're also working on continuing to make the network even more useful for people. And so that means partnerships like these ones that we just talked about, but also some of our own products like World App that we build that are used by millions of people every day that let you do things like chat with humans in a private way or things like that. And so those are our two biggest priorities, continue to grow the network and continue to make it more useful and both for developers and for users. We've made a huge progress this year and we have a lot of special things prepared for next year.
Well, we'll be watching here and we're very excited to see what unfolds for you and the team the year ahead. Thank you so much for coming on theCUBE.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Gemma Allen with theCUBE here at our studio on the New York Stock Exchange, connecting Wall Street to Web3 in Silicon Valley. Thanks so much for watching.